Hey everybody, this is kind of a weird and different video, and I've never really done anything like this before publicly, but before I moved out of my New York apartment, I took some video and kind of walked around and talked about what it was like to work there, and it was right before the move, so there was a bunch of boxes everywhere, and it was way more cluttered than it would normally be, but the audio came out terrible, so I never posted it, but when I posted a picture on social media of the empty apartment, a lot of people encouraged me to post the video anyway, so I figured I would try to re-record the audio, so it's going to be, I guess, a little bit awkward, but and really just talk about the apartment that I lived in, how I was able to work in such a smaller space, and just kind of have a fun nostalgic look, even though it was 2 weeks ago, but it was a nostalgic look at where I lived for a couple of years and how I made a lot of the videos and how I was able to jam so much stuff in such a small apartment. So by no means is this a normal video of mine, so I completely understand if most people wouldn't even want to bother watching it, but if you want a view into what it was like to make RetroRGB videos and do a lot of testing, please check this out. And also, my OCD requires me to remind you that I was just getting ready to move when I shot the video, so my apartment was always clean and you never had to step over monitors to get the stuff, but you kind of see that in this video because I was starting to pack up, so reserve your judgment a little bit, I guess. But anyway, let me walk you through my old apartment. Alright, here's the main entryway hallway to the apartment. There's a leftover BVM from when I was working on the A-Series 68X video. My friend hadn't picked that up yet. And here's the main table that was like the main center of my apartment. Kitchen table, work table. It was lucky enough to have an amazing view. I'll change the camera settings here so you can actually see it, but it's a beautiful view from that table. And that's pretty much everything. I would write all my scripts there because for some reason I can't stand and write scripts at the same time. But I would also use this as all my table shots, or that's how I labeled them in the videos. So you've probably seen this angle before. That picture actually is one I took myself in San Francisco. I was on a catamaran ride and it was so foggy you couldn't see 5 feet in front of the boat, and then all of a sudden the clouds cleared and those two sailboats came into view, and I reached out with my DSLR and snapped a shot. That was like the only time in my life I was ever like, ooh yeah, I got a good picture. All my other good pictures was because I took 1,000 and one happened to come out good. I got the mini Mr. Cade, which I would be able to slide the chair right over and just start playing, which is awesome because that's like the only setup in the apartment that I was able to do that with, just press a button. Here is the kitchen, which I also shot a ton of videos in. That's where I set the board on fire for that Warrior 64 video. And funny thing too, this is my favorite like life mod from my apartment. That fan right here. So if you're in a house, if you see something like that, you turn on that exhaust fan and the smoke goes right out into an exhaust vent, but this one just vents it right back into the kitchen. I don't understand what the purpose of this is, because it just fills the kitchen with smoke rather than lets it kind of hang out in one area. So I installed a special outlet here to make sure for protection. I have an adjustable thing right there, and I had zip tied a fan to the output. And my favorite thing about this was that not only was it functional, but people on the internet lost their minds when I posted that. And, a lot of people had polite questions like, okay, that's probably good for heat, to remove heat from your kitchen, but isn't the return vent venting back into your apartment? And if you only grew up in houses, that's actually a great question, and the answer is no. In most apartment buildings, there's a separate chimney for exhaust. And the reason for that is because if you have somebody like cooking fish on the first floor, you don't want the other 18 floors to smell fish because it's going back through other people's apartments. So I had that grease filter on there, and I would turn that on, and it did a pretty decent job venting everything from the top of the stove out. But some trolls on Twitter were just losing their mind, like, you're poisoning your family, you're putting the smoke back into the apartment, you're dumb, I do this for a living. Which, by the way, if you do this for a living and you don't know that, you're probably pretty bad at your job. Sorry, just saying. But no, I mean, it's a totally understandable question. Makes sense that people would ask it. It just was funny that people thought I didn't think about that. But the other thing too, because it's an apartment, you're not allowed to make any permanent changes, so I just made sure to zip tie all that stuff, so it worked. And now is a view of the entire apartment. You can see the boxes already started piling up. Some of that is record player stuff. A friend of mine was nice enough to get me a wonderful housewarming gift, which I will be live streaming that. But yeah, that's like my boxes slash shipping station for the last month that I was in there. It was never that cluttered before, but anybody that's moved could totally understand why there's just a pile of boxes and bubble wrap there. Got the bedroom over there, and then the bathroom with another exhaust fan zip tied in. That one's battery powered, so you can get the steam out when you're showering or the smell out when, you're pooping. And over here, we have another shot of like one of two closets in the whole place, and then back over to my BVM, which unfortunately, because it was the only flat surface that wasn't occupied in the entire apartment, it was very often used for storage. I tried to do it for stuff like this, like incoming projects, things I needed immediate access to or about to put in my storage area or something like that. It really bothered me, though, that was storage. From now on, that's the only thing ever going on top of that is going to be the BVM controller, and I'm never having anything on there again. I got the Mortal Kombat boards from Scanline City, the awesome cases, plus some other arcade stuff there. But basically, everything in this apartment was storage. Those two doors underneath that shelf had a bunch of consoles and stuff in it. I jammed games and controllers everywhere I possibly could. I had the speakers for my surround sound. That black glass thing in the middle is called a tittle. I'll do a video on that one of these days. But I even jammed like my Virtual Boy in its case over in the box over there. Just every corner I could possibly put something in, I would. I got all the consoles down there. They were not hooked up. Those were just storage, but kind of easy access, and it was neat seeing them through the glass. I got my Oppo Ultra HD Blu-ray player over there, and then just my stereo over to the right, which, in an apartment, you couldn't really turn it up, so certainly looking forward to that now in a new place. Got another pile of monitors and stuff, and I got my PC that I used to work on, but I turned that into an Unraid server next to it, and just more piles of stuff. I got records, my original Woozle Game Boy Advance consolizer, some more games, but this is pretty much the shelf that you see in the background of all of the New York City videos, just a different angle. And speaking of which, this is the other side of the view that you always see. There's always stuff piled on whatever monitor I had there, but usually my, just me standing in front of it would block it in the videos, but that's kind of always the view. Also got my folding chair for when I used to go outside and sit, because you can't leave them outside or they get really gross and dusty. So I would always have the folding chairs there and like plastic stuff outside that I would wipe down. And over here is the divider that separates the living room from the office, which is kind of funny because it's all the same room, but that really was just the dividing factor with a ton of stuff in every box. I'd have to move that couch to get to anything in the back boxes, which is why I stored so much stuff on top. Anything I needed quick access to was right there. I got my bug zapper and my fan and stuff there, and a balance board that was supposed to help build core strength and lose a gut. Obviously that didn't work. I got my guitar pedal and all of the easy access stuff I needed to grab when I was doing my videos, and even just a little mini rack in the corner just to help, with storage. But those plastic bins were technically my desk. So that was where everything was stored. And to the right of that was just the other side with that backpack is actually all of my camera equipment. So I didn't have room to have another shelf for it. So every time I was done, I would have to repack everything into a backpack. I'm so glad I'm not going to have to do that anymore. I got my Vuelix stick that I bought from Art. Love that one. But this is... on the other side, I have two PCs stacked. The main one that I use is a Xeon Workstation on the bottom. On top, I built another one just dedicated for video capture, which I'll be using a lot more now that I'll have easier access to both, just because I always have issues with capture, so I want a dedicated machine. But over here is just everything that I needed to access to make everything as efficient as I could. All of my adapters, a drawer with a bunch of stuff in it, and here's the standing desk that you could adjust the height with all of my soldering stuff right here. And this is just the most efficient setup I've ever had. Anything I needed to do, I just reach forward, plug it in, because I always leave that stuff unplugged, but plug it in, fire it up, and I'd be able to immediately just start soldering, desoldering, whatever else. And even the microphone I tried to be efficient with. So all I would have to do is swing it over, plug it into my audio interface, and start recording. And even behind that, I had the oscilloscope, I had the RG bench from Cordimoto, and I had that running into this BVM, which is actually a really finicky monitor, but that's good for testing, because if it worked on that one, it would work on anything. That's one of the H series that has all that sync problems, but could go all the way up to 1080i. So it was really perfect to have up to the oscilloscope, because I could just plug everything in and just start testing right away, and even have it linked to my computer. That's just 3 shop lights was my lighting, and I would always mount the camera to a clip mount right there. So setup was just swing the arm around like you saw before, screw the camera into the clip mount, plug everything in, and hit record. And that was it. That whole space that I worked in, that office, if you will, wasn't big enough to stretch both my arms out. It was all super efficient, because I did everything floor to ceiling, and I tried to have everything right in arm's reach, but that was it. Just that tiny little area with a window right next to me, with the sun always shining in my eyes. But let's check out the outside, because this is probably my favorite part of the whole apartment. So here's where I would go at the end of the night after working, plop down on that furniture, or if I didn't feel like wiping it down, I'd grab the cloth stuff from inside. But by the way, that giant building next to me caused an echo of sound from the ground up that made it louder up here than on ground level. So it was actually so much louder up here. Also, that's where the wizard used to hang out with his bullhorn attached to his cell phone, playing the same 3 songs over and over. That killed so many videos. Ugh. Anyway, on a much lighter note, this balcony was my favorite part, because I never in a million years thought I would ever live in a place where I got to see this gorgeous view. It's a little hazy when I shot this, but I'll have more pictures of it. But it's just absolutely amazing. That building in the distance with the pole up top, that's Times Square. We could kind of see the H&M building back there. So it's just absolutely incredible that I got to see this, and I can't even begin to describe how much I appreciated it and how I never took this view for granted. Even on really long days where I would just work myself to death, I would, at the end of the day, pour a glass of water, come out there, and even if I just hung out for like 2 minutes and just listened to the sounds of the city and looked around, I'd do it every day. I was absolutely just so lucky to be able to do this, and it was my favorite part. So that's pretty much it. The office, the full apartment, and everything I could possibly do to work in New York City. I'm really, really going to miss it, but it was a good run.